Well, if you folks have ever listened to me, you know I spent a number of years on the radio and talking about stuff that was going on. But I want to talk to you about the passing of someone in radio who I had a tremendous amount of respect for because, in my humble opinion, he was a genius. His name was Gary Burbank. Now, many of you may have listened to him back in the 1980s, 1990s, whatever, when Gary Burbank was on WLW in Cincinnati. WLW. I used to drive around. Back in those days, folks, I was in sales. I was in sales from like 1975 to the year 2000. 25 years. I was in my car every single day out selling, marketing, talking to folks, working with folks. And every time I got back in the car, I turned my radio on because there are certain stations that I listened to as a loyal fan of radio back in those days. Early in the morning, if I got up early, yeah, I'd listen to certain radio stations. If I was out of town, I'd listen to WGN. Wally Phillips was the guy on the air. Wally wasn't funny. He was kind of like a father, He was kind of informative and amusing. And that was kind of in the morning. During the rest of the day, there were certain people on the air in various radio stations. And I had my dial set up, and I would punch into the stations that I'd listen to. But one of the ones in the afternoon I like to listen to, aside from listening to the likes of Rush Limbaugh, at noon o'clock, was Gary Burbank out of Cincinnati. Gary Burbank was funny. He was brilliant. He had a character, Earl Pitts, American. He would do some great bits. Gary Burbank was almost like a savant in a lot of ways. He was brilliant. He was kind of like a Jonathan Winters or maybe a Robin Williams, that kind of character. Always did these various characters. But it was something that you listened to. And somebody like me who followed radio and loved listening to all the people on radio, I was punching around all the time. But when you're driving around as a salesman, you get a lot of time you can spend in the car listening to the radio. And the times I was listening, there's various stations I tuned into. Yes, I listened to the local stations for a certain amount of stuff. If I wanted to hear, like I said, Rush Limbaugh or somebody like that, yeah, I'd tune in locally. But I also tuned into the stations around the Midwest, 50,000 watt powerhouses that I could hear. I liked the people on the stations. And I'll tell you, in the afternoon, I'd listen to a guy named Bob Collins. Uncle Bobby, they called him. He was funny, he was amusing, he was interesting, down-home kind of guy. I remember back in 1978, when he went on the air with an emergency message that somebody had adulterated bottles of Tylenol off the shelf and poisoned people. Well, now, if you buy a bottle of something, there's a plastic cap on the top. Well, that came from that poisoning scare that happened back in the late 70s. Now everything is covered. I mean, you got to tear it off to figure out. And if it's torn off, you're going to say, no, I ain't buying that. That came from that Tylenol scare back in those days. That Bob Collins. Now, Uncle Bobby was killed in a tragic plane accident. He liked to fly. He's out flying and, fortunately, in the air, ran into another airplane. Not good, folks. You ain't going to live through that, and he didn't. They tried to bring in another guy, Spike O'Dell, bring him in, but it wasn't the same as Uncle Bobby. So the rest of the day, I tuned into Gary Burbank, WLW in Cincinnati. He was amusing. He was funny. WLW had some great characters on as I listened to it. As a matter of fact, if you were into sports, people don't know this. If you were into sports, they had a sports talk show just like WoWo did. WoWo had a good sports talk show, very good. Came out at 6 o'clock at night. You had Art and Dean, and you had Dean McNeil, a whole bunch of folks on there. They did a fabulous job. But WLW had a guy named Bob Trumpy. Bob Trumpy played professional football. I think he went to the University of Utah, if my memory serves me correct. He was their sports guy, Bob Trumpy, on WLW. And then when he decided to step down, they handed over to a guy named Chris Collinsworth. You may remember that name, Chris Collinsworth. I think he played for Cincinnati, if my memory serves me right, and I think he did. Second-round draft choice. He became a talk show host, and ultimately, Chris Collinsworth, you see him on network TV nowadays. But all those characters, all the radio, listening on radio, is one of the most powerful things you can do because Steve Allen was right. Radio's theater of the mind. Television is the theater of the mindless, or something to that effect. Back in the old days, Orson Welles, Invasion from Mars, did that on radio. Scared a whole lot of people because a lot of people believed it. I mean, he even told you, hey, this is not real. We're doing a play acting. But he did it so well that people bought into it. Well, the comedic abilities of Gary Burbank, who passed away at the age of 84, were legendary. And I can tell you that because I'm a fan of radio, I'm a fan of broadcasting, and I'm a fan of listening to good talent. And there's good talent on the radio. And frankly, I wish there was more. But in today's day and age, well, it may get a little bit thin. But you know what? If you enjoy radio, find the right station, find the right announcer, find the right host, and listen to him or her. And if they're good, they will convince you. And if they're really good, you'll convince others to listen to that person. Just saying, radio is theater of the mind, and it is powerful.